Welcome to DAOists. The purpose of this recording is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of this is financial advice.
And welcome to Lunch and DAO Live. It is me, Eric C. Mack, and today I've got a very special guest, somebody a lot of you will recognize. You'll at least recognize his voice, and it is, of course, Sensei Steve himself. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today to talk a little bit about what this whole community is all about.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, glad to be here. I've been watching some of your work, and I love what's going on in the content team and all the work product that's coming out of this.
Well, good. We're moving along slowly but surely, and well, actually speedily but surely, it seems like. But today, I wanted to take this opportunity to just kind of step back and learn a little bit more about who you are and how this concept of DAOists initially came about. So let's start before we jump into the community and the concept. What's in a nutshell your backstory?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I say, in certain circles, I say I've done everything but hair and makeup. So I'm originally from the East Coast, and going to college, I majored in media studies and political science, and I went into film production, basically, working my way up through the production ranks, as I mentioned, everything but hair and makeup, and then later got into the web. As the web was taking off, I formed a web agency, moving from a broadcast agency to a web production shop, which I started up in the late 90s, and had a really nice run of that up until the early 2000s. And then I decided to move from Los Angeles to the Bay Area. So I'm now based up in San Francisco, and been working with startups, been taking my production background and skills and bringing that to the world of startups, treating startups as productions. That led to a lot of mobile apps, IoT products, and ultimately into working with crypto companies, people that were either throwing events or they were building hardcore tech for cryptocurrency and blockchain. And from there, I started looking into what could be done with this technology, with blockchain, with distributed ledger technology, I guess is how we refer to it at its most atomic level. And looking at fractionalizing ownership, looking into NFTs. I'm not an investor per se, and I'm not someone that was mining Bitcoin in 2012, but really appreciating it for its power, for the fundamental features and aspects of the technology that can really be quite powerful and applied in many different ways. So fast forward to wanting to get involved in some NFT projects, and happened to start looking into the A16 canon, the crypto canon, and the NFT canon from Andreessen Horowitz, and watching and reading all of the articles and videos, YouTubes they had posted there, and found a couple guys. I wish I had the names here, but maybe we'll reference them later, who had created a YouTube podcast that was about the experience and the process of creating NFTs. And within that, they talked about a DAO. That was my first introduction to DAOs. And they talked about working with Friends with Benefits, this social DAO. And I thought, okay, I need to join this group to learn more and be able to explore with the people there that have experience in these different areas. So I joined FWB. This is, I guess, in the early days compared to now, way before it costs like $10,000 to join, and started going down the DAO rabbit hole. And it was so interesting. I decided to as an experiment, create a DAO and see what happened. And because of where I was in my DAO evolution, I decided to invite people to the DAO for the purpose of learning together how to DAO, basically. And now fast forward a handful of months later, and we have a thriving community called DAOists. And who would have known? And along that journey, the vision and the potential for what this DAO could be has continued to evolve and will continue to evolve.
Yeah, and so I wonder the directions that it's taken. Has anything surprised you from where you thought it was going to head to where it actually has landed? And then we can talk about where it's going later.
Yeah, what I would say is that what I'm really surprised about and excited about is the ability to create organizations with very little resources based purely on individuals' desire to co-create something, to gather around a mission, co-create something, and birth that into reality. As a producer, I'm always looking at, okay, what are the resources that I need to actually take a vision and manifest that in the real world, whether it's a video production, or it's a startup company, it's a technology and it's an application, and looking at, okay, let's reverse engineer it. Let's figure out what we need to end up with. Let's figure out how much time, money, and human resources and equipment it's going to take to achieve that. And then we can move forward and get that done. In the world of DAOs, all you need is a Discord server and a community and a message that resonates with people, and they will come and participate. So there's a lot of pros, and there's a juggling act. When you're working with autonomous individuals, everybody is free to come and go as they want. Generally, people that join DAOs are in a number of DAOs, and the challenge, I think, is to build a solid community that's dedicated to the projects that the DAO is working on and that they're working on, and seeing those projects through to fruition. But we've been graced by having a lot of people show up and resources contributing, and we're able to actually do quite a bit, and that's expanding. So very exciting time.
And with DAOists, just in the few months that I've been hanging around with these folks and with you, the mission seems to have evolved a little bit from, a place to hang out and learn how to DAO and kind of explore this new Web3 world together, to also bringing in more of an evangelizing mission. Does that seem right to you?
I think that's on the mark. As we have evolved, we've seen, like, what is the power of DAOs and what is their place in the future of businesses and organizations. And the hypothesis evolved based on witnessing what's going on in the real world, where the workforce is becoming more remote. We experienced COVID, which I think was a huge accelerant for what DAOs could be, and it really exploring this possibility and getting things done, and the ability for people to leave their day jobs and work piecemeal for bounties or for salaries or as contractors for distributed and often autonomous organizations. I think the acronym DAO, standing for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is very accurate in some regards, and it's not so accurate, I think, to the vast majority of DAOs in terms of the decentralization aspect, because any organization that is going to own intellectual property or build something and take on liability most likely would benefit from a corporate structure, although the DAO and the collective, the community, can actually run and manage that corporate structure. So it's somewhat decentralized, not as decentralized as it might sound to the initial person listening to and trying to figure out what are DAOs. But I don't think that's a detractor from anything. And then that ties into what our hypothesis is that as people are leaving their day jobs and all the people that are creating products and delivering services, if it becomes harder for large organizations to retain those folks, they're going to need to compete with what DAOs offer people in terms of their ability to be autonomous, be self-managers, and have some say in the governance of their lives. So what I'm seeing is the possibility, and I think a lot of DAOists share this view, that some element of governance can be pushed out to the edges of an organization in order to retain talent and in order to provide individuals with more agency and control over their destiny. Because currently there's a direct waterfall from the CEO in most cases to the worker at the end of the chain. We have labor unions that try to address that, but on a very macro scale. So what I see as a better solution and a huge possibility is working with DAO principles and tools to enable organizations, regardless of their collectives and clubs or their Fortune 500s, to provide the workers out at the edges with some feedback loop to be able to help manage their manager, to be able to raise grievances, and to be heard and have a larger voice as individuals and as collectives of those individuals within an organization.
You touched on kind of some of the ambiguity that I think is a hotbed for discussion right now around the ambiguity of the D in DAO. Is it decentralized? Is it distributed? And our hidden producer behind the scenes, Eureka John, actually has a question. He says, in theory, a DAO is a headless organization, but in practice, there are some issues. Decentralization is good, but the bus needs a driver. How do you, Steve, see yourself as in the role of driver of DAOists?
Well, often I feel exactly like that, a bus driver. I'm trying to keep people on the bus. I'm opening the door, letting more people on the bus. If people raise their hands and they want to get off, I'll open the door and let people off the bus, or they don't even need a door. It's not too dangerous just to take that leap. But I totally agree. And thank you, Eureka John, for mentioning that. Yes, I personally think that in general, that distributed is a better definition of the D in DAO than decentralized. I think decentralized DAOs exist, and they can be basically code that community run individuals that are decentralized and vote, but really the code is what runs the organization. And there's a smart contract that can just operate autonomously, and that's the autonomous part. I tend to think of the individuals within the organization being the autonomous component. But in human organizations, as a species, we tend to group around and be most effective in creating things by gathering around whoever is holding that vision and can specify what needs to be done and can kind of wrangle the cats or coordinate the process. So I think in a DAO, the way we exist, the bus driver can always be replaced with another bus driver. So hopefully the bus driver is being effective, and the organization is a human organization. It's not the organization structure is not purely code. So there needs to be someone making sure that all the voices are heard. It can't just be chaos, because it's hard to create out of pure chaos.
And I think we keep the chaos fairly limited, actually, in this community, which is kind of an accomplishment in itself. And with regards to this community, what struck me, and I think why I stick around both DAOists and other DAOs in general, is I wasn't really on Discord much until I came across DAOs. It was like the thing that my daughter uses for Fortnite and for gaming. And when I started poking around some of these other servers, including ours, it became really surprising, and I think this is part of what has drawn so many people in so quickly, is the diversity of people that we're seeing in our community. It's, you know, not just, you know, gamers in the basement messing around in DAOs in their spare time. It's attorneys, it's you know, professionals of all kinds. It's people from across the world. It's people in internet cafes in Lagos or wherever. And it's really been impressive. And I think there's, you know, multiple things at play there. I think that we've heard about the Great Resignation, and I think that's clearly driving some of this. As well as, you know, whatever ongoing backlash to the overreaches of Web 2. You know, what do you think is driving this Web 3 and DAO movement that's been moving so quickly in the last year?
That's a great question. I think what's driving it is not only the possibility that people can do this, people have become more comfortable working from home. They don't want to spend 2 hours a day commuting when they're spending 8, 10, 12, you know, in Silicon Valley, maybe 16 hours a day working in teams. And we've learned to be just as effective managing our own time and working out of our own spaces. I think the other thing that's driving it is the finances. So right now we're benefiting from a huge run up in the value of cryptocurrencies. So there are a lot of people in the world, there's been a huge transfer of wealth. There are a lot of people in the world that can support DAOs through grants. There's a lot of projects that are very well funded. And there are DAOs that are playing with different ways of self-financing, using tokens, NFTs. We're actually looking at what's the best model for DAOists right now. We're currently not tokenized, and we've been doing quite well without having to reward people via token mechanism or using that for governance, but we'll need a governance methodology, and tokens tend to be a really good tool to use for governance because they're immutable, they're on chain, they're secure, so we can really know who's casting a vote and come out with a decision, a streamlined decision-making process using the crypto tools that are being used for lots of purposes. I think that's the other side of what's driving things, is that there's money there. People can get bounties in cryptocurrencies, and they can either hold those, and if those are running up in value, then everybody's happy, or they can cash those out to pay the rent and buy food.
And there's, you know, I think we've definitely had conversations around, you know, governance and moving towards tokenization, you know, but I noticed that, you know, in our community right now, there is, you know, there's the financial incentive perhaps in the future, but there's definitely people that are just coming back week after week and showing up in our server, definitely for some sense of community, I think, as well. Because there is, you know, some very interesting and smart conversations going on around where all this is going to take us and the role that each of us can play in this future that seems to be being built. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the Web 1.0 days, where I think both of us spent time in Silicon Valley in the late 90s. It was a short period for me. I kind of caught it as the bubble was bursting. And, you know, there was certainly people there, you know, chasing money, but there was also a lot of people there, you know, chasing the utopia that maybe recently turned into a dystopia. And so maybe now we're trying to restore that initial vision and maybe iterate and correct where things went wrong. That's at least how I see it. How do you see that aspect of it?
Right, I tend to agree. I think if you're talking about the dystopia, a lot of the dystopia of the social networks are predicated on the ability to hold attention, and hold attention generally through drama. So just like the TV media, anyone that turns up that dial of drama to basically create a more polarized environment is going to get more people watching and sticking around. And if they get people caught up in the drama, that ends up feeding the cycle that we're seeing today in politics all over the world. The vast distinction that I see in DAOs is that you have people coming into a social server or channel, and it doesn't matter if it's Discord or Telegram or Slack. There's a lot to choose from. We tend to use Discord because it has some really valuable capabilities in terms of having all our voice channels, having all our stages and discussions all happening in one place, and having really fine grained controls over roles and who is on what team, etc. But the biggest thing I've noticed with DAOs is the congeniality between people that are collaborating together, because really the reward for the organizations and the groups that are coming together is all stemming from our ability to work together and co-create together. And having a positive set of values and having norms that promote that is really important for the longevity and success of any of these organizations. So because we're not purely motivated by keeping eyeballs on the screen as long as possible so that we can advertise against those eyeballs, it's almost like the anti algorithm that tends to result in more polarization of the audience.
You know, we don't rely on, there might not be the reliance on eyeballs. I do kind of worry about the reliance on you know, the correlation to the crypto markets, and you know, number go up all the time. And I kind of wonder about what would happen if we went into another deep crypto winter. And I wonder how much of the for these tools and principles that I think we're both interested in, does all that enthusiasm go away, shrink drastically? What do you think?
We both lived through the dot-com bust of 2000, and you know, I experienced, I call it the double whammy of a dot-com bust in 2000 and then 9/11 in 2001, and that was a serious hit to business. And the people that survived were the ones that were either had really strong fundamentals financially, or they were a bunch of missionaries. So I think we have a lot of folks on board that are missionaries, but human existence is we all have necessities. And if we can't meet our necessities within the DAO, if there's a downturn and things become less frothy, then I think we'll certainly suffer a slowdown and a cooling. But I think that will be temporary. I really see today where we are with crypto technology, call it Web3, is sort of the catch-all for all this possibility. I'm very bullish on that. And even if even if cryptocurrencies drop by half and takes 2-3 years to come back, there's going to be a lot of successes along the way. And I think this is something that is fundamentally shifting the landscape of how people live and work and relate. And it's going to touch every aspect of what we do, just like the internet is touching every aspect of what we do. And we saw it coming. So I liken this to 1993 in .com days, or 1994, let's say.
I was really truly taken by surprise. I remember about 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, everyone was saying life was still kind of lived on the web back then. So this is before the takeover of the Web 2 giants and social media. And at the time, everyone was saying, oh, everything's going to apps. It's going to be an app dominated world. And I really didn't think that was going to happen, and was really proven wrong when suddenly we were all just living inside of a proprietary Facebook, Instagram, whatever, living inside the walls, the coded walls of those worlds. And so it speaks to the question of technologies being co-opted, and that the web really was co-opted and jammed into these boxes created in Menlo Park or wherever. So I wonder, is there anything built into the underlying philosophical foundations of Web3 that you think, what prevents the next Facebook or Google from coming in and building a better mousetrap out of Web3, and the ethos that motivates, I think, both of us now, of being more community oriented? What is to keep Web3 from being more corporate oriented as Web2 has become?
Great question. Well, with Web 2, obviously the internet is fairly open. And I think that is what is fueling the boon to Web 3, because even more so, everything or most things happening in Web 3 are happening out in the open. The code is more open source than, let's say, Facebook's algorithms and the walled garden that some of these social media networks need to maintain. So I believe that there'll be more interoperability. At the same time, it will be taken over, and sectors will be taken over by large organizations. The governments are stepping in to take over large portions. So central banks, it may look very different 5 or 10 years from now from the type of exchanges we have. Just the legislation that passed, the governments are trying to figure out what to do with crypto. China's put its stake in the ground. The United States inevitably will adopt a digital currency. And then we look at the regulation around stablecoins and the potential for fraud and abuse. So I think there is a place for government in all of this. And I'm listening closely to what the legislators are saying and doing. And it'll be interesting to see how the regulatory landscape shapes out. But I'm heartened by what I'm seeing in terms of the United States, for instance, remaining very open and remaining fairly hands-off unless there's actual fraud being committed, people promoting things that are not true and bilking others out of money. So I think we always want to be able to stop and jail the fraudsters, but I like the fact that the folks in the institution, the legislators, are seeing this as a new technology that's a game-changing technology. And I think there's a lot of pull behind wanting the United States to be a leader in that space.
So we've got a few of our DAOists community members actually kind of hiding out here backstage in our virtual studio, and not quite ready to go on camera, but do have one comment from JD Medlock, who says, just an observation on the power of DAOs. Says, I'm excited for their potential at democratizing organizations and businesses. It has the potential of being a power for good, since investors are users rather than exploiters.
Very true. Currently, and organizations have not been around that long, as we heard from Adam Davidson not long ago in a conversation that you facilitated. If we look back at the history of organizations, of corporations, we're only going back really 100 years for the modern corporation. And I agree that currently the balance is, I think, out of balance for what best serves humanity. Currently, if a CEO of an organization, a public organization, does something more for humanity than for shareholder value, they can be sued, and shareholders can win, because their fiduciary duty is first and foremost to the profit of the shareholders. So it's really a system that gives shareholders all the power to hire and fire the CEO, and then generally the CEO has all the power to hire and fire the others in the organization, and that's the top of the waterfall. So absolutely in Web3 technologies and DAO tools and the principles that DAOs are leading with more agency for the individuals, I believe that that has a huge power and potential to bring things into a more sane balance where decisions can be more centered on what's good for the members of the organization and what's better for humanity as a whole.
And so Eureka John says, what about self-regulation stepping in where regulators can't? For example, Twitter reporting and ratioing bad actors in the space. Maybe DAO members could be sheriffs of their own towns, DAOs, for example. What do you think?
I agree. I agree that the members are the sheriffs of their own organization. So just like any club, if there's a bad actor, the club has to have governance systems that can remove someone who's being really toxic and detrimental to the organization.
So what do we? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I agree that that needs to happen, but on a, I guess on a macro level, that's on the micro level within individual organizations. What's the governance system there, and how do organizations deal with internal issues? And then there's the other question on a macro, who's going to regulate DAOs? I think there's a place for government to protect individuals, members of DAOs, investors, just like they protect shareholders. And I think that hopefully will be even-handed, and the weight and the power of those regulatory agencies will be mostly focused on keeping the potential fraudsters out of the equation. But I don't know, and I don't think that just an association of DAOs would actually have the teeth or the will to step in and do the kind of regulation that's probably necessary to help DAOs actually thrive and help cryptocurrency remain legitimate and valuable to people.
So we're not all moving to Wyoming. I thought that was the plan. Is that off the table now?
Denver.
Right.
Inside joke. I think Wyoming's doing some interesting things, but that will ripple out and other states will follow suit. And in a lot of what we're doing, we don't even need necessarily new structures. I think with the way I see it in the regulatory landscape, if you're going to walk like a duck and quack like a duck, the regulators are going to say you're a duck no matter what you call your tokens or your currency or your governance. So I think it's really important for folks in the industry to really look at what the analog is in the real world to what they're doing now and apply hold themselves to those same standards, and then watch how the regulators are actually, pass the guidance, how the regulators are actually enforcing things. But I think there's a lot of enforcement and a lot of regulations that actually apply, and it would be smart for anybody involved in creating an organization to understand what that is and not just have a naive sense that because they're calling themselves a DAO and they're using tokens, that now they're not a security and they can't be touched.
So what do you think is next? I've been telling people to watch out that DAOs might be to 2022 what NFTs were in 2021 in terms of it kind of the concept kind of cracking the mainstream and being a topic of conversation. Do you think that's overstating it, understating it? What do you think?
I think that's possible. I don't know if that's good. If it's another balloon, yeah, I think what we're talking about are like the tulips in Holland syndromes and what happened in 1999, 2000 in the dot-com era, where just money was thrown at folks who had no ability to really manage that money and turn it and create companies that were viable. So if that happens with DAOs, I imagine the same thing will occur, that there will be some that will be game-changing organizations that will dethrone some non-DAO Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 incumbents. That is entirely possible and probable in my mind. So it would be a wise investment for folks to invest in ownership and invest their time in participation in building that community if that provides ownership, just like stock options in a corporation. So I think that it is also likely if the spotlight ends up being shown on DAOs the way it's currently on NFTs, then I could see a lot more capital rushing in to try to own a piece of that from the speculator standpoint.
Backing up a little bit to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, the idea of spreading DAO tools and DAO principles. We've talked a little bit about this, but what do you think? What do you think that looks like? Does it look like DAOs spreading up and literally supplanting, taking the place of other more traditional organizations? Does it look like mini DAOs or aspects of DAO governance inside of existing corporations and organizations? All of the above? What do you think?
I think all of the above. It's going to look like DAOs becoming powerful and competing with entrenched incumbents, and it's going to look like entrenched incumbents adopting, in order to remain competitive, adopting some of those principles and tools. And the tools are using crypto for helping to streamline governance, and the principles are that individuals should have greater agency in their lives and in the functions and the values of the organization.
So, okay, that's interesting because I think so here JD Medlock, I think maybe uh, gets at what I was trying to get at in a more focused way. He says, given the uncertainty around things that are still evolving, like regulation, what are the pillars that a DAO should be built on? For example, governance. What would the other pillars be?
I think it really comes down to the organization when we're talking about what the pillars of the organization should be based on. So every organization, I think it's just good practice to have a clear mission and to have clear values, and those will drive some of that decision making. So just like not every organization, but most organizations have different structures, but there generally are a lot of similarities. They tend to do things in the way that really fits their model and allows them to compete and succeed. I think it will be no different in DAOs. There'll be a lot of DAOs that are working in the same space. There'll be DAOs that people become more interested in and DAOs that people become less interested in. And at the end of the day, even though right now there's a lot to go around, everybody needs productive, committed participants. And to the extent that DAOs can attract the right talent and membership and accomplish their goals and ship product, deliver services, whatever those end up being, that's going to be the measure of their success and longevity.
Yeah, I think you jumped into my next question there, which is there does seem to be this fine balance of, you can meticulously set up the perfect governance system that perfectly balances different motivations with providing value and liquidity and all that other good stuff. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to having an active and engaged and passionate community to do all the things. Like it gets at it also puts to the lie the idea that anything is truly autonomous in DAOs, because the robots aren't doing it yet. I mean, some of the bots are, but there's still meat bags behind everything.
Exactly. I agree. And as we're experiencing, we have a lot of dreams and a lot of aspirations, and we can only pursue as many things as the community is willing to step up and help drive forward. So that's the art of moving a DAO forward, is to coordinate and maybe orchestrate. So maybe that's, I like the bus driver analogy, but what might be more accurate is a conductor of an orchestra. You can start with two strings, a horn and percussion, but how do you fill a philharmonic, um, with people all playing in unison, and uh, and how do you engage and attract more good people to come in to build what you're already started? I think that's a really big question, and that's what we're looking at here. You can also augment with contractors. There's lots of ways to achieve that. Ultimately, we want things to be community led, community built, community sourced, and we're operating more on a consent mechanism. So if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want to do X," we can say, "Great, if you can build the support within the community to do that, we can completely support that mission, and that becoming more of the mission of DAOists, as long as it fits within the greater vision and mission statement that we've adopted." So we need to do a little bit of a litmus test of whether or not this is actually serving our greater purpose, that we've stated, and then how do we get it done, and is that something that people step up to collaborate on?
And then does that change when, tokens enter into the tokens or bounties, or, whatever other external motivation might enter into the picture? Does that then become the decision making tool? Like, you show up and you have an idea and you have the wherewithal and the availability to carry it through, but it doesn't necessarily garner the votes for having the budget appropriated for it. Do we just kind of move to that more familiar system then, or is there still room for an internal passion economy, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, if what you're suggesting is, can you do it all on volunteer effort? Lots of things can be done on volunteer effort, but at the end of the day, people need to eat, pay rent, and provide for the basic necessities. Until we're living in a purely socialistic state where that's all provided for, and then people can just choose what they want to do with their time. Um, I think we're still going to be bound by those by that gravity, by those physics of the environment that we work in. And in terms of utilizing tokens and doing fundraisers, selling NFTs, a lot of organizations are raising the funds they need to do those to achieve those tasks and complete those projects they're committed to. So I think, just like a regular organization, there needs to, if there's financial resources that need to go into that, then those financial resources will need to be obtained in some fashion.
Right, right. Um, so another question from Eureka John, who wants to know: do you see yourself as a long-term Taoist? I'm sorry. Do you see yourself for the long term as the founder of Taoists, or a Taoist for life, or more as an apostle building a DAO and giving it wheels to move on its own, and then moving on to form other new DAOs?
It's a good question. I haven't given it that much thought yet, where I feel like we're just getting started. And I hope to be able to birth this DAO, and then if my role, if I'm no longer the best person to serve in this role, which is, not even voted on at this point, we're still working out that governance. I'm only considered the founder and refer to myself as the founder because I started the Discord and started the flywheel going. Um, so hopefully that will be maybe in emeritus, if that's the correct pronunciation, emeritus. As the one who kicked things off. And I see the potential for DAOs to act as accelerators, as venture studios, potentially. As an entrepreneur, I have a lot of dreams and desires and ideas. And hopefully, as a good manager, I can edit those things down to what's doable in the moment and keep things maybe on the side burner or the back burner until the time is right. As we have more resources, we can explore that realm. As an organization, we're already branching out. We're producing media, we're producing written content, we're looking at events and other things that we can do. We have a project that we've launched that we're maintaining that is a DAO resource base. That is our first project that folks gathered around to create and maintain, and that's a database of all DAO organizations, tools, and media that people can access and use as a foundation for their learning and their research. So we hope to maintain that in perpetuity and engage new contributors and maintainers as well as other DAOs that in that project and in other projects. So there's also opportunity for a lot of cross DAO collaboration, and that tends to be very powerful. It's a very collaborative environment, not just within people within the DAO, but within multiple DAOs and multiple DAO memberships. So one of the other things that's very powerful and valuable is if there's a great idea, folks from many DAOs can rush in and create a world-changing, transformational project or take on a mission that is really game-changing. I think that's what excites me the most, is the possibility that we can have human potential come together in a way that we can conquer lots of things. And right now, we have recently Constitution DAO, people coming together in short order, raising over $40 million to buy a copy of the Constitution. Just because they didn't succeed in purchasing that copy of the Constitution, that's a huge proof point to what could be done. What can we do in humanitarian crises? What can we do if we come together to attack really big problems like global warming? What can we do as a really powerful collective of humans organizing, self-organizing, and self-funding things that can potentially change the world and benefit huge numbers of people?
So I feel torn on this point. Yeah, pretty much everything you mentioned, I could say, like, what Constitution DAO was this amazing display of, spinning up a remarkable fundraising effort in really short order that also seemed to have some fairly glaring flaws in its execution. And okay, so I'm a journalist and have been a journalist for a few decades now. And cynicism kind of comes with the territory, unfortunately, although I'm not really a cynical person at heart. It kind of gets beaten into you a little bit. And so I wonder about, the potential for cross collaboration with DAOs and kind of this ethos of collaboration that we see everywhere across all DAOs right now in this really early stage. And the cynical part of me wonders, how long can that last until things start to become more competitive and DAOs start to see territory that they want to protect? And it again reminds me a little bit of the analogy with the Web 1.0 period in the 90s, where there was also a lot of talk of collaboration and utopian thinking, and that all changed. So I guess the question is it really different this time?
Yes and no, I think, is the answer. It's different, and it's no different. Humans are humans, and human nature will survive whatever DAOs become, and DAOs will be infused with human nature. If that part of our nature is to compete, everything I see, everything is a double-edged sword. So if we start to compete more, there's an energy that we bring to that competition. Does that help us retain the people who are driving the membership and enabling the progress and the productivity and the output of the DAO, or does that competition become a toxic, self-destructive mechanism inside the DAO? I think we'll see a lot of that. And coming back to Constitution DAO, I see a lot of these experiments now as proof points of what can be done. Granted, with any proof of what can be done, we can focus on, the 1,000 mistakes. If we look at the story of Edison and the light bulb, discovering 1,000 ways not to, create light through electricity until doing it. So I tend to focus on the thing that, what's that one thing that worked? And now can we take that one thing that worked and match it with other things that work and create something new? And of course, we're going to have blind spots and we're going to fall down in places. But each time I think we'll improve.
Well, it's, the last few years in particular have been striking in the way that, we live. There's very dystopian characteristics to the world that we live in, but right alongside these like remarkably utopian. Really, in my lifetime, there's the example we hear all the time. I do carry around a supercomputer in my pocket that answers all my questions and can have somebody sent to deliver me a pizza and take me across town within 20-30 minutes. Like that is utopian. And I don't need to point out, I think, the dystopian things that have happened over the last couple years. And it makes me wonder if perhaps it's always been this way, that we're living along in a dystopia alongside a utopia, but the dystopian aspect of it just becomes a little more bearable. Like today, like it's pretty difficult to starve to death as an American and in a lot of developed countries. So, despite the many problems, we're getting along better. I guess as long as life expectancy is going up, maybe we're all okay. I don't know. Any final thoughts? What have I left out about DAOists, or anything that you want to be sure that we touch on?
Well, I think first I'd like to just to entertain the thread that you're going down right now, because some things that were coming up for me while you were talking about that. I think my glasses tend to be a little bit rosy in their shade. That's my optimist side just shining through, because I do see a lot of potential. And then everything that we experience is a double-edged sword, as I mentioned. There's the dark side and the light side of anything. The printing press, that it enabled the distribution of the Constitution, but also enabled the distribution of Mein Kampf. With great power comes great responsibility, and what do we do as individuals to create the utopia we want to see? And what do our failings embrace to drive wedges and destroy with that same power? So I think we have to continually look within and check in on what we're creating, what we're putting out in the world. And in terms of technology, we can go back to the printing press. We can go back to, one of my early visions of what the future looked like was heavily influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I was like, okay, 2001, we're going to be taking shuttles into space, and we're going to have video calls with our family. And that was a little bit ahead of the time. But now fast forward like another 20 years after 2001, the time frame that Kubrick set that film in, I think we've actually now even come further in many ways, in terms of basically everything, all of our digital media. So we had a revolution in the internet. We had a revolution in social media, the ability to communicate with more people more quickly. You look at the the Arab Spring and everything that was fueled with in the early Twitter days. Now we've got Facebook, and we've got fragmentation and polarization of political parties. So we've got a lot of dark, but we still have all this new potential that we didn't have yesterday.
For sure, for sure. I agree. And to some extent, like that's one of the genius insights of blockchain is, in a way, it's a technology that tries to account for some of the dark side of human nature, which perhaps in balancing the utopia with the dystopia, perhaps that's where hopefully things can continue to fall on the side of the utopia. With in blockchain, you have built-in transparency and immutability that I think theoretically acts as a hedge against dishonesty and cheating, frankly. So yeah, I'm hoping we're on the right road and taking that insight and that technology and trying to bake it into our organizations and the way we get stuff done. Any final thoughts? We're about at an hour here, and figure we should start to wrap it up. But what are we leaving out?
Well, I like the idea of leaving off on a high note, of keeping a view on what is the good that we can do in the world, and how can we reach toward a more utopian society. How can we apply these tools to really solve a lot of the problems that are left unsolved?
Yeah, looking forward to seeing where it goes next, and hopefully it goes through Denver, from what I hear.
Yeah, I think the train is moving in that direction.
All right, East Denver 2022. And well, hey,
more
thanks.
IRL meetups. I think that's maybe one thing is like what's the new normal, even post COVID. I think we're gonna be in our rooms. You can see that we're both in our homes, basically broadcasting this out to the world, and we crave communing in person. So we can set times and places on the planet to converge. And I think that's I'm excited about that potential also, to have fewer commutes on a daily basis and more in-person gatherings with the people that I'm collaborating with.
For sure, I'm looking forward to it as well. And on that note, I'll leave it on this note. I with the pandemic, I think there was a lot of anticipation in the northern summer of 2021 that it was going to be this fantastic party coming back out into public, and that didn't quite happen. At least that didn't happen where I live and across.
It's coming. The summer is coming. I think we started with the winter's coming. I think the summer is coming.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is
Indian summer.
Well, I think that coming out and that coming together, since it didn't really happen in 2021 to the extent there were no speakeasies as far as I can tell. It wasn't the Roaring 20s. But I think that energy, instead, some of it went into DAOs, and so I think it will be quite the magnificent party when all that energy that's been funneled into DAOs then does burst forth IRL in Denver in February.
Right. We're kind of living in the Matrix, and then we can unplug and we can come to our caves and we can just dance our booties off in a big sweaty rave scene.
There you go. Bring a mask, folks. Bring a mask. All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve. It was fun as always, and we will see you in the Discord server. And remember, right there, DAOists.xyz is where you can find all the information on what we're working on, and it's got a link to join us in Discord, and hopefully very soon in real life.
Come check us out, and we'll see you there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.